Section 1. The Spark of Chaos. It was a lazy Sunday morning in Columbus, Ohio, a day meant for waffles, warm coffee, and binge-watching sitcoms. Ella Thompson, a bright but socially awkward physics professor, had just settled into her routine when her phone buzzed. Weather alert! Severe magnetic storm activity detected. Stay indoors. A curious message, sure, but Ella was no stranger to science anomalies. Well, she thought with a wry smile, there goes my trip to the farmer's market. Across town, Marcus Kane, a retired firefighter turned community volunteer, was driving to his monthly charity event. The warning came through his radio, but he shrugged it off. Storm or no storm, kids still need shoes, he muttered. Little did he know, his day would take a turn so bizarre that he'd soon question his own sanity. By early afternoon, things began to feel off. People on the street stopped mid-stride, staring at their phones or the sky. Social media exploded with videos, birds flying in erratic patterns, random sparks of electricity surging through parked cars, and most bizarrely, faint, glowing orbs hovering above city parks. Ella, ever the skeptic, pulled up her laptop to analyze live feeds of the phenomenon. Localized EM fields, maybe? But that doesn't explain the plasma formations, she mumbled. Meanwhile, Marcus parked outside the community center and was immediately accosted by kids yelling, Mr. Kane, look! The sky's broken! He looked up. The clouds were swirling, and between them, faint cracks of bluish light shimmered like shattered glass. That's not good, he muttered, his instincts kicking in. By 3 p.m., chaos was undeniable. Electronics flickered, then died completely. Phones, cars, and even traffic lights succumbed to the mysterious outage. On the news, experts speculated everything from a rogue solar flare to an alien invasion. Ella's heart raced as she grabbed her go-bag, a habit from years of survivalist YouTube binges. Her apartment shook violently, and in a flash, she was thrown to the ground. When the tremor subsided, she stepped outside. To her astonishment, she saw what appeared to be a tear in the air itself, pulsating with an unearthly hue. Marcus, still at the community center, rallied the terrified children and their parents into the basement. Everyone, stay calm, he shouted, masking his own fear. Just then, the building trembled, and a high-pitched hum filled the air. He stepped outside to investigate and froze. In the middle of the playground was a massive sphere of light, shimmering and expanding. Why is it always the retired guys who have to deal with this nonsense? He grumbled. The true shock came moments later. From the sphere emerged 3 towering, humanoid figures, each encased in translucent armor that seemed alive, pulsating with veins of energy. Their faces were obscured by what looked like liquid masks, constantly shifting. Ella, driven by equal parts terror and scientific curiosity, approached the rift in her neighborhood. She gasped as she saw similar beings emerge. They're not just visitors, she whispered, her analytical brain racing. They're explorers. Or, her stomach dropped. Conquerors. Marcus, holding a crowbar from the basement, squared his shoulders and shouted at the creatures. Hey! What do you want? His bravery earned him nothing but a blinding beam of light that sent him sprawling. But instead of pain, he felt a strange warmth coursing through him. What in the... he muttered as the aliens turned their gaze elsewhere. By dusk, the invaders' intention was clear. Using their advanced technology, they began scanning and cataloging humans like wildlife. People were herded into glowing enclosures, unable to move or speak. Ella, watching from her rooftop, noticed something chilling. The aliens avoided anyone holding a certain device, a vintage shortwave radio. She sprinted down to her storage closet, rummaging frantically until she found her late father's old radio. This might be the only thing they can't interfere with, she murmured, her fingers trembling. Marcus, meanwhile, realized his strange warmth hadn't faded. In fact, he felt stronger, faster, almost enhanced. He used his newfound agility to evade the aliens and free a group of trapped civilians. One of them, a wiry teenager named Ethan, whispered, "You're like a superhero, dude!" Marcus smirked. If superheroes have bad knees, sure. As the first night fell under an eerily glowing sky, both Ella and Marcus felt an unshakable sense of purpose. They had no idea their paths would soon collide, but one thing was certain: this was no ordinary invasion. It was a test, and humanity's only hope lay in ordinary people rising to extraordinary challenges. Section 2: The Unfolding Chaos. The world had changed overnight. By dawn, Columbus was unrecognizable. The alien spheres now hovered ominously over the city, radiating an energy that felt both oppressive and surreal. People huddled in makeshift shelters, whispering prayers or futile escape plans. The air itself seemed charged, as if the earth were holding its breath. Ella Thompson, clutching her shortwave radio, was perched in the shadows of her apartment. Her scientist's mind wrestled with an impossible equation. How could something so advanced fail to suppress one of humanity's most outdated technologies? There's something they don't understand about us, she muttered, her voice tinged with equal parts fear and determination. Across town, Marcus Kane was already in motion. After freeing the small group of civilians the night before, word had spread about the man who could resist the aliens' beams. "You're like a walking glitch in their system," Ethan had exclaimed, his awe evident. By now, Marcus had realized the strange energy coursing through him was no accident. Whatever the alien's beam had done, it had altered his physiology. He felt invincible, stronger, faster, and sharper than ever before. But it wasn't just about power. "If I don't use this to protect people, what's the point?" he thought, his firefighter instincts driving him forward. "Are we really just going to sit here?" one of the refugees demanded. A nervous crowd had gathered in the basement of a local library, where Marcus had brought them. "You're not sitting," Marcus replied, his voice calm but firm. "You're surviving. And I'm going to make sure of it." "But what happens when they come back?" another voice chimed in. "We can't stay hidden forever." The fear was palpable, but Marcus wouldn't let it spread. "We won't stay hidden," he declared. "We're going to fight back. But first, we need to figure out what we're up against." Meanwhile, Ella began experimenting with her shortwave radio. The alien's rift hovered just a block away, pulsing like a living wound in the sky. Each time she adjusted the dials, the rift seemed to flicker. "It's responding," she realized, her heart pounding. But her discovery wasn't unnoticed. One of the alien sentinels turned its gaze directly toward her apartment, its liquid mask shifting as if scanning her. Ella ducked behind her counter, clutching the radio to her chest. She heard the creature's metallic footsteps outside. For a moment, she thought her life was over. Then, the sound of shattering glass. Boom! The sentinel was thrown backward, its translucent armor cracking. Ella peeked out and saw Marcus standing there, crowbar in hand and Ethan behind him with a slingshot. "You're welcome," Marcus said, grinning. "But we're going to need a bigger plan." The unlikely pair joined forces, retreating to Ella's apartment to regroup. "So, you're a scientist?" Marcus asked, scanning her cluttered living room, which was filled with schematics, diagrams, and alien tech sketches. "Physics professor," Ella corrected. "And you're—" "Just a guy with a crowbar," Marcus said with a shrug, though the glow in his eyes betrayed something far more extraordinary. As they shared their experiences, Ella revealed her theory. "The shortwave radio interferes with their technology," she explained. "I think it's because their systems rely on frequencies that can't handle older, analog signals." Marcus frowned. "So we fight aliens with Grandpa's tech? That's ironic." "It's not just tech," Ella said, her voice rising with excitement. "It's ingenuity. They might have superior technology, but they don't understand human adaptability." Their plan began to take shape. Using the radio as a disruptor, Ella suggested they amplify its signal through the city's emergency broadcast towers. "If we can jam their systems on a large scale, it might give us a fighting chance," she explained. But there was a problem. The main broadcast tower was in the center of downtown, right where the alien's largest sphere loomed. "That's suicide," Ethan said, his voice cracking. Not if we're smart about it, Marcus replied. And we don't have a choice. This is our home. We can't just hand it over. The journey to the tower was fraught with danger. The streets were patrolled by more sentinels, their glowing forms scanning for any signs of resistance. Marcus led the way, using his enhanced agility to scout ahead and take down threats silently. At one point, the group came across a young woman trapped in a glowing alien cage. The structure pulsed with energy, making it nearly impossible to approach. Wait, Ella said, studying the cage. The radio might disrupt this too. She adjusted the dials carefully, and the cage flickered. With a triumphant burst of static, it collapsed, and the woman stumbled out, sobbing with relief. See? Marcus said with a grin. Grandpa's tech. By the time they reached the tower, the group was larger, with more rescued civilians joining their ranks. The sight of the massive alien sphere hovering above the broadcast station was enough to make even Marcus hesitate. Let's hope this works, he muttered as Ella set up the equipment. Suddenly, a sentinel appeared, its glowing armor shimmering with renewed intensity. This one was larger, faster, and more menacing than the others. Marcus stepped forward. You guys handle the signal, he said, gripping his crowbar. I'll buy you time. The fight was brutal. Marcus used every ounce of his newfound strength, dodging energy blasts and landing blows that echoed like thunder. The sentinel was relentless, its movements almost too fast to follow. Meanwhile, Ella and Ethan worked frantically to connect the radio to the broadcast system. Come on, Ella whispered, her hands shaking. Finally, the signal activated, sending out a wave of disruptive energy. The sentinel froze mid-attack, its liquid mass glitching before it collapsed in a heap. It's working! Ethan shouted. But their victory was short-lived. The alien sphere above them began to descend, its energy intensifying. Marcus, battered and bleeding, looked up and said, What's plan B? Ella stared at him, her mind racing. We improvise. Section 3. The Climactic Confrontation. The ground trembled as the alien sphere descended, radiating a menacing hum that vibrated in their bones. It was a show of power, a declaration that the aliens wouldn't tolerate resistance. Ella, Marcus, Ethan, and the growing group of survivors stood frozen, staring at the sphere that loomed like an impending storm. We need to move, Ella said, her voice edged with urgency. If that thing touches down, we're finished. Marcus, still gripping his crowbar, wiped the blood from his forehead. His enhanced senses were now firing on all cylinders. Every instinct screamed that running wouldn't save them. We hold here, he said firmly, stepping in front of the group. Ethan balked. Hold? Against that? Are you insane? Maybe, Marcus said, his lips curling into a wry smile. But I'm not letting them win. Ella's mind raced. If we amplified the disruptor signal directly into the sphere's core, it might destabilize it. Her fingers trembled as she sketched out a rough plan on a torn piece of paper. Marcus glanced at her notes. Might? Ella met his gaze. We don't have a guarantee, Marcus. But it's our best shot. The plan required them to infiltrate the tower's upper levels, which now swarmed with alien sentinels. The sphere had deployed its own guardians to protect itself. Each step toward their goal would be fraught with danger. Great, Ethan muttered. Suicide mission it is. Ella clapped him on the shoulder. It's not suicide. It's survival, with style. They moved swiftly, their growing band of survivors split into teams. Marcus led the charge, taking out sentinels with a combination of brute force and raw determination. His newfound abilities gave him an edge, but even he couldn't afford a mistake. The sentinels adapted quickly, their attacks growing sharper with every encounter. I could really use a flamethrower right about now, Marcus quipped as he smashed another sentinel into the wall. Ella, meanwhile, rigged her disruptor device to a portable generator. She muttered calculations under her breath, her focus unshakable despite the chaos around her. Ethan, hand me that wire. Ethan scrambled to comply, his hands shaking as he passed her the cable. You're sure this thing won't blow us up? Nope, Ella said, connecting the last piece. But if it does, you won't have to worry for long. Ethan stared at her, wide-eyed. You have a really weird way of calming people down, you know that? The team reached the top of the tower, where the air crackled with raw energy. The sphere hovered directly overhead, close enough to feel its oppressive heat. Alien symbols danced across its surface, glowing in ominous patterns. Ella set up the disruptor on the tower's edge, positioning it to aim directly at the sphere's core. Marcus, I need you to buy me 5 minutes. He glanced at the mass of sentinels closing in. You'll get 3. The battle erupted into chaos. Marcus fought like a man possessed, every swing of his crowbar reverberating through the air. The sentinels weren't just attacking, they were learning. Each strike became harder to land, each dodge more precarious. At one point, Marcus found himself cornered. 2 sentinels loomed over him, their glowing blades raised. Just as they struck, a burst of static energy knocked them off balance. Marcus turned to see Ethan holding a repurposed alien weapon. Thought you could use a hand, Ethan said, grinning nervously. Marcus smirked. Took you long enough. Below, Ella activated the disruptor. A piercing hum filled the air as the device powered up, its signal reaching out toward the sphere. The alien structure began to flicker, its glowing symbols distorting like a corrupted video feed. It's working! Ella shouted. But the victory was short-lived. The sphere unleashed a deafening roar, sending a shockwave that knocked everyone off their feet. The disruptor sputtered, its signal faltering. Ella scrambled to her feet, her mind racing. The generator was damaged, and they were running out of time. Marcus! I need you to stabilize the core! Marcus, bleeding and battered, didn't hesitate. He charged toward the device, using his enhanced strength to hold it steady against the growing shockwaves. Whatever you're gonna do it fast! He shouted. Ella made a split-second decision. She tore open the disruptor's casing, exposing its raw energy core. This might fry everything, she muttered, connecting the wires directly to the generator. Ethan's eyes widened. Are you insane? You'll kill us all! Not if it works, Ella shot back, her voice steady. She flipped the switch. The disruptor roared to life, its signal now amplified beyond anything they'd tested. The sphere reacted instantly, its surface cracking like shattered glass. Marcus shielded his eyes as the alien structure began to collapse. A blinding light erupted from its core, engulfing the tower in an otherworldly glow. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, the sphere imploded with a deafening roar, sending out a shockwave that toppled sentinels and knocked out power across the city. As the dust settled, Marcus helped Ella to her feet. Did we win? He asked, his voice hoarse. Ella looked at the smoldering ruins of the sphere. We survived. For now. The remaining sentinels began to retreat, their connection to the sphere severed. Cheers erupted from the survivors below, their voices echoing through the darkened streets. But Marcus, Ella, and Ethan knew the fight wasn't over. This was just the beginning.